It was almost midnight when the knock came, sharp, loud, and official. Porch light cut through the fog, landing on two men in badges. But something was off. No cruiser, no dispatch, and no protocol. My wife's eyes narrowed. She'd seen enough. Subscribe. Before I tell you how a fake badge backfired into federal consequences, stay with me. This wasn't just a warning, it was the end of their game. That Friday night had been quiet, unusually so. The cicadas were still buzzing outside, porch lights glowing dimly across the cul-de-sac, and I had just settled into the couch with my wife, Laura. Our shepherd dog, Max, was dozing near the door. That kind of silence before something breaks. At 11:42 p.m., it did. 3 hard knocks. Not frantic, deliberate. Measured. I glanced at Laura. She muted the TV and we both paused, listening. The kind of silence that pulls your breath in. Max was already upright, ears sharp. He didn't bark, just stared toward the door. Something was wrong. Through the side window I could see 2 figures. Both wore dark clothes, belts glinting under the porch light, and badges on their chests. But their car, no lights, no markings. Just a dusty black SUV. No radio chatter. No body cams. No nameplates. The vibe was wrong. Cold wrong. I opened the door slowly, chains still locked. "Evening, sir. We've had complaints from your HOA," the taller one said. "Need to come in, have a word." His voice didn't match his stance. Too casual. His partner didn't speak, just kept looking past me, like scanning for a weakness. I didn't move. "ID," I said. He held up a badge, generic, not from our county. No agency name, no rank, no photo. I looked to Laura. She hadn't blinked. Instead, she stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and opened the hallway drawer. My stomach tightened. I knew what she was about to do. She stepped right past me, didn't say a word, just stood on the porch in her t-shirt and sweatpants, holding her U.S. Marshal badge out like a shield. "You're going to repeat that, and say it into this," she said, tapping her phone. It was already recording. That's when it all changed. Both men froze. Not like guilty kids. Like predators cornered by a bigger hunter. One of them stepped back. The other lowered his fake badge like it suddenly weighed 100 pounds. "We were just following up on," he stammered. Laura didn't blink. "You're impersonating law enforcement. And this is federal property. Move." The shorter one bolted first, down the steps into the SUV, door slammed. The other followed, stumbling as he ran. No code words. No excuses. No time. The SUV peeled out, tires screaming, vanished into the dark like rats fleeing light. Laura turned back inside, her face calm. But her hands were shaking. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she said, "They weren't alone in this." She was right. This wasn't just 2 idiots with badges. Someone had sent them. And in our neighborhood, there was only one group that felt entitled enough to do that, the HOA board, led by none other than Karen Ellington. That night we didn't sleep. We didn't argue. We documented everything. Photos, timestamps, the license plate, even Max's behavior. Laura filed the first report at 2:37 a.m., not to local PD, but directly to her office. This wasn't neighbor drama anymore. It was federal now. And someone had just made a very bad mistake. By the next morning, the neighborhood was pretending nothing had happened. Sprinklers ticking on, joggers pacing by, Karen Ellington waving her usual forced smile at passing cars like she hadn't just sent 2 fake cops to our front door the night before. But Laura and I weren't playing pretend. We knew something had snapped. The HOA had crossed a line, and we weren't letting it slide. We started our morning quietly, not with coffee, but evidence gathering. Our doorbell cam footage was pristine. Full facial shots, audio, timestamp, vehicle make and plate. Laura compiled everything into a locked folder on her secure drive. While I took Max on a walk around the lake, she was already on the phone with her supervisor at the Marshal's office. They didn't take impersonation lightly. Around 10 a.m., we got our first signal that someone was squirming. A courtesy letter from the HOA slipped into our mailbox. It was printed hastily, no letterhead, no signature. It claimed an incident had occurred involving external enforcement, and that we should cooperate to avoid further complications. No mention of who sent the men. No admission. Just veiled threats and generic bureaucracy. The letter made one mistake. It mentioned the HOA meeting scheduled for that evening. That letter was the red flag Laura needed. She cross-referenced the time and address, confirmed it wasn't the usual community center. It was scheduled for a private residence, Karen's own backyard. That was strange. HOA meetings were always in public venues. Something about this screamed cover-up. They're cleaning house, Laura said. And they're hoping we keep quiet while they do it. She was already typing a report request to the county's legal counsel. Around noon, we noticed another shift. A white sedan began slowly circling our block. No plates, tinted windows, same one that had been seen parked outside Karen's house a few times before. I watched from the upstairs window, jotting down times. Max growled low each time it passed. It circled 6 times, then vanished. Intimidation, plain and simple. I filed a civilian incident report with the county that afternoon, using my credentials as a reserve federal contractor. The form was long, deliberately frustrating, but I knew how to fill it so it couldn't be ignored. We weren't just documenting. We were building a case. Meanwhile, Laura got a call back from a colleague. The badge number shown on one of the impersonators had come up in a prior fraud case, completely unrelated, but on file. This wasn't random. They'd used known fake law enforcement prop. By 4 p.m., we had surveillance footage from a neighbor who had captured the SUV arriving and leaving our street. Same vehicle, same night, clear timestamp. The neighbor had no love for Karen either. Apparently her fines for brown grass had tripled during the summer. She's pushing people too far, he said. We're just scared to say anything. That fear was what Karen thrived on. That evening, we didn't just show up to the HOA meeting, we documented it. Laura wore her badge, clipped low but visible. I brought a small body recorder and a printed log of the incident timeline. The meeting was already underway when we arrived. Karen's voice floated over the yard speakers, all sweet and rehearsed. She froze mid-sentence when she saw Laura step through the back gate. Evening, Laura said calmly. We're just here to listen. You could feel the temperature drop. People shifted in their chairs. Karen tried to gloss over it, calling the meeting informal, and not for complaints. But the energy had turned. Nobody was laughing anymore. We sat silently for 15 minutes, letting her sweat. Then, right before she could adjourn, I raised my hand. Quick clarification, I said. Was the HOA involved in any external enforcement actions on our property last night? Karen stammered, denied, and tried to redirect. But Laura stood up, badge gleaming. We have federal evidence that individuals impersonated law enforcement. If anyone here is connected, now would be the time to speak up. Dead silence. One board member quietly left the backyard. Another wouldn't make eye contact. Karen tried to spin it into paranoia. No one here would do that, but the spell was breaking. The fear that had kept neighbors quiet was starting to melt away. Laura said nothing else. She just handed Karen an envelope. Our official legal statement, time-stamped, signed, and submitted. By the time we left, people were whispering, not to Karen, but about her. And that was the moment I knew. The HOA wasn't going to survive this intact. The next day began colder than usual. A sharp breeze scraped across the porch railings as I stepped out, mug in hand, eyes fixed on Karen's house across the cul-de-sac. No movement. No HOA clipboard walkbys. It was the first morning in weeks I hadn't seen her doing her rounds. But I didn't trust it. Not after the stunt she pulled with the fake cop. This was silence before the collapse. By mid-morning, Laura had already filed her internal report, not just a local complaint, but a formal federal document. Her office escalated the incident under the category of impersonation of federal law enforcement, which carried criminal weight. That meant any connection to the HOA was now officially under federal scrutiny. Karen didn't know it yet, but she was sitting on a powder keg, and every smug smirk she flashed before would soon turn to panic. The real shift came at 1:14 p.m. I remember the time because the knock on the door startled both of us. It wasn't a Karen-style HOA knock. It was firmer. 3-rap. I opened it to find a woman in a county compliance uniform, clipboard in hand, flanked by a younger man holding a digital tablet. "We're here regarding a complaint filed against your HOA," she said. "May we speak inside?" My jaw clenched. The dominoes were falling already. Inside, they laid it out clearly. Multiple residents, not just us, had submitted formal complaints in the last 48 hours. Some about the fake police incident, others about unauthorized fees, falsified citations, even intimidation. The compliance team had been quietly gathering material on the HOA for months, but Karen's latest power grab had blown the lid off. "What you and your wife submitted," the woman said, "gave us probable cause to audit the entire organization." I watched her scroll through documents, bylaws, meeting minutes, board appointments. Most of them were irregular. Half the board hadn't been legally elected. Budgets hadn't been disclosed in 2 years. Fines had been issued without due process. It wasn't just bad governance. It was unlawful. The HOA had operated like a private kingdom under Karen's control. But now, the gates were breaking. Later that afternoon, I noticed a stream of cars outside Karen's house. Not neighbors. These were suits. One man carried a briefcase stamped with the county seal. A woman from zoning stepped out with an aerial map of the neighborhood. From my window, I watched Karen come to the door, still in her signature red windbreaker, lips moving fast, hands in defensive motions. But the officials didn't back down. Papers were handed over. One man pointed to her mailbox, the same one where she'd stuffed our fake letter. Her face was pale. At 4 p.m., a neighbor knocked on our door. Mrs. Sanderson, retired schoolteacher, usually kept to herself. She looked shaken. "They just told me we might be getting a full re-election," she said. "Karen's not going to be president anymore." Her voice cracked with relief. "I've been fined 3 times for insufficient mulch. I thought I was the only one." I shook my head. "You're not. Not anymore." That evening, Laura received an email from the district legal office. They'd accepted our statement into an ongoing HOA abuse investigation. The fake police incident, the impersonation, the intimidation, all bundled into a case that was now under federal and state review. It wasn't just Karen's problem anymore. The entire board was implicated. Karen didn't leave her house that night. Lights off. Curtains drawn. No red SUV pulling into her driveway. But the neighborhood was alive. People were talking across fences, porch lights flickering on as neighbors who hadn't spoken in months shared their own stories of harassment. For the first time, I felt a real shift, not just against Karen, but against the silence she had built her power on. Laura sat beside me on the porch swing, her badge tucked away, no longer needed tonight. "They always think nobody will stand up," she said. "But they forget. Sometimes all it takes is one quiet voice to start a landslide." I nodded, watching Karen's dark windows, waiting for the sound of the final break. And deep in my chest, something told me, the storm wasn't over yet. By dawn, a strange quiet had settled over the neighborhood, the kind that came after a storm had gutted everything in its path. Karen's house remained dark. No car had left or arrived all night. But by 7 a.m., county compliance trucks were parked at the cul-de-sac entrance again, not for questions this time, but for execution. The HOA was being formally dissolved. At 8:12 a.m., an announcement hit every resident's inbox. Effective immediately, the Lakeview HOA charter is suspended pending final dissolution. The message was blunt, legal, and irreversible. Beneath it, a PDF listing infractions, falsified board elections, misuse of fines, and impersonation of law enforcement. Karen's name appeared 10 times. She hadn't just overstepped, she'd trampled state laws. Now the system she ruled over had no legal standing left to protect her. One by one, neighbors emerged from their homes, checking phones, whispering across porches, walking their dogs slower, making eye contact. No HOA. No Karen. Just us again, owners of our own homes. Freedom didn't explode. It seeped in slowly like sunlight through storm clouds. But it was real. I stood on my porch watching the HOA signs pulled down. And I felt something strange for the first time in months. Ease. But Karen wasn't done yet. At 10:03 a.m., she burst out of her house in a disheveled panic. Phone to her ear, waving a printed letter. "This is illegal," she screamed at the zoning official parked outside. "You can't take this from me." She pointed at our house. "This is retaliation. They've poisoned the whole board." But no one answered her. Not this time. Her shouts bounced off walls, carried by the wind like the final cries of a toppled tyrant. What Karen didn't know was that Lara's agency had cross-filed her behavior under obstruction. Her fake cop stunt wasn't just embarrassing, it had legal teeth. And the HOA's abuse of authority, now unshielded by official structure, was Karen's burden alone. That afternoon, Lara received confirmation. Karen would be served with a cease and desist, and likely charged with impersonation-related offenses. The HOA couldn't protect her. And the community wouldn't either. At 3:45 p.m., I stepped out and walked the gravel path that led to the small lake behind our home. The same lake Karen once tried to fence off, claiming it was private HOA property. Birds skimmed the surface. Kids played near the bank. No one was stopping them now. That lake, like everything else she'd tried to control, was free again. I took a deep breath. The air felt different, like something old had been lifted. By evening, word spread that a temporary resident council would form, neighbors volunteering to coordinate cleanup, gardening, and general security until the county could rezone the district. No HOA, no president, just people. One of the first volunteers was Mrs. Sanderson. Another was the guy Karen once fined for hanging a prayer flag. "I guess now we talk to each other," he smiled. Not through Karen. It was messy, but it was real. Lara and I sat on the back porch that night, watching the moon ripple across the lake. "She built the whole thing on silence," Lara whispered. "Fear." People kept quiet. Until they didn't. I nodded, watching shadows dance along the water. "Truth doesn't shout," I said. "It waits. And when it moves, it doesn't need to raise its voice." As darkness settled, Karen's house stood alone, windows dark, mailbox empty. She wasn't arrested. Not yet. But something had been taken from her far more painful than a title or a rulebook. Her control. Her platform. Her silence. And when power collapses in silence, it doesn't echo. It implodes. And just like that, the neighborhood exhaled,